green creatures maybe weren't as good as I thought they were, when I first started playing. And I felt really smart for knowing that. But I got to tell you, I have relearned the lesson that sometimes big stats matter. That it's just like, it's huge. This thing, it +4/+4 is absolutely massive. This thing's a 6/6 if it gets to transform. And the really cool part is that you have a lot of control over that. You can just be like, you're tapped out, go. And this thing's flipping over and killing a creature. Like it's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a massive creature that doesn't suffer from any of the problems that putting big creatures in your deck suffer from, because it's affordable, it's flexible, it's going to generate value when you cast it and when it flips, and it's not even inconceivable that this card could transform back and forth multiple times in a game.
Totally.
And it probably will in the games when it transforms once. So
yeah, I'm a big fan of it. That said, I have it between B+ and A-. It does affect the board in a meaningful enough way that I could see it getting an A-. But when you're behind, right, the +4/+4 ability kind of disappears, and you're getting a 4/4 for 5, which is medium. When you do get to transform it, then you're kind of back in the ball game because it's going to kill something. So I don't know. I don't really know where it fits on that scale. I'm going to say A- just because after having played with it, I was impressed by it enough that when I was attacking, it was so good that when I'm behind, I'm still settling for, a reasonable card here. It's not like it's dead when you're behind.
yeah, I would have put it at an A, but it's possible that it's an A-.
Yeah. Heron's Grace Champion is 2 green-white for a 3/3 human knight. It's got flash and lifelink. And when it enters the battlefield, other humans you control get +1/+2 and gain lifelink until end of turn. Woof.
Yeah, I like this card for all the same reasons that I said I liked the Spirit of the Hunt. Just as an efficient creature with flash, and it can pump your other creatures. It's a little bit worse because it costs more, and you get a little bit more out of it with the lifelink. But in general, it's going to be a worse card, but play out very similarly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's only giving other humans you control the +1/+1 on lifelink, so keep that in mind. It's not your whole team. But, man, I could see this card really doing some work. It's a little weird, like you're going to want to do it while you're attacking sometimes, which is kind of a weird time to play a creature, but yeah, you're going to do it. I think Heron's Grace Champion is excellent. I think that, green-white, of course, are the human colors. You're just sort of naturally going to end up with a lot of humans in those colors anyway. And I think it's probably like a B or a B+.
Yeah, I had it about there.
Tamiyo Field Researcher is next. And this is, of course, another Planeswalker. So Tamiyo costs 1 green, white, blue. So we're talking about splashing here almost under any circumstance. Is she worth it? Well, she comes down with 4 loyalty. Her +1 ability is choose up to 2 target creatures until your next turn. Whenever either of those creatures deals combat damage, you draw a card. Of note, you can target your creatures or their creatures or some combination. -2, tap up to 2 target non-land permanents. They don't untap during their controller's next untap step. That's pretty insane. Tap down 2 creatures and just keep them on ice for a full turn cycle.
Very good, yeah.
And then her ultimate is -7, draw 3 cards, then you get an emblem with you may cast non-land cards from your hand without paying their mana costs. Which is also kind of insane, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like you could probably put together a win by using the +1 and the -2 before that point. But Tamiyo seems very powerful to me. Being able to lock down their 2 biggest threats to give you some time to sort of build out a board or just kill your opponent seems really good. The +1 ability strong. If you're ahead, you're going to just, put the game away in sort of an unreal fashion as you have a Planeswalker and are drawing extra cards while dealing damage. If you're behind, you can still target their 2 creatures, block, maybe get some trades, draw some extra cards, etc. And then the -2 ability, you can do it back to back if you need to and just sort of use it as a massive tempo play. There's a lot to like about Tamiyo here.
Yeah, I like Tamiyo, but I will say it looks like it's at its best when you're the aggressive player. And that's how you get the most out of the +1. And using the -2 is either like pressing your advantage or staying alive, and it's kind of poor use of a card to stay alive.
Right.
I like the +1, but it means you need to be aggressive. It's hard to cast a 3-color spell when you're being aggressive, but if you can make it work, it's really high power. I would lean towards saying like a B+.
I think so too. The fact that she's so difficult to cast is really a tough one.
Yeah, it's the biggest knock against it.
Yeah, for sure. B plus for Tamio seems fine though.
Yeah.
All right. We've got a few colorless cards. I'm skipping through because some of these are the transformed cards. But all right, here's one. Decimator of the Provinces. So this one is 10 mana for a 7/7 Eldrazi Boar. It's a mythic rare, but it does have an emerge cost. And again, I decided to break these off because I was true to the actual mana cost. But the truth is, you're much, much more likely to play this in a green deck, as its emerge cost is 6 green, green, green. Pretty steep. But when you cast it, creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain trample until end of turn. And on top of all of that, the Decimator itself has trample and haste on its 7/7 body.
Yeah, this is the throwback to Craterhoof Behemoth.
Indeed.
And yeah, this card is very, very good.
Wow.
I think in a green creature-based deck, it's probably just an A. And
Agreed.
I wouldn't play it in a deck that wasn't green. Just 10 mana for that ability is just, it's a bit too steep for me.
I just don't think you're ever playing it. Yeah, 10 mana is just too much.
You could concoct a scenario where you could play it, but it's pretty rare.
It's pretty rare. But the emerge cost, I mean, the interesting part about that is that you God, maybe you just do. I was going to say that you're not necessarily incentivized to emerge the Decimator of Provinces at the earliest convenience. But now that I think about it, you probably just are. Even if it's only giving like one other creature a pump, you're going to attack for so much damage that the next turn, given that the Decimator has trample and haste, of course, it just means you're probably going to win anyway. So yeah, you'd probably just slam this thing at the earliest turn you possibly can, almost regardless of board state.
Would be really hard for it to be a bad play.
Yeah. Wow, what a great card.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I called the boar from the previous set the big pig, but man, we've got the bigger pig now. This guy's ridiculous. How do we grade it? The emerge cost is still rough. Triple green is no joke.
Yeah, but can the emerge reduce the green?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So you have to have GGG mana available. The 6 colorless is all emergible, so that's easy. But I mean, I would assume like a 4 mana creature would probably be what you're likely to sacrifice to it. If that's the case, you're playing GGG2 for this, which is certainly worth the cost. It's just difficult. GGG is tough to come by.
It's a steep color requirement. You probably need 9 or 10 forests in your deck to run this card, but if you pick it early, you're going to be base green and you're going to prioritize creatures. So if you have a good curve in a green deck with this, it's like, unless your opponent's done something very powerful, you're almost always going to win by casting this card.
I'm going to call it an A.
Yeah, I like it at that.
I think Decimator of Provinces is good enough to get an A.
Yeah.
Distended Mindbender is next. It's 8 mana for a 5/5 Eldrazi insect. Its emerge cost is 5 black. When you cast Distended Mindbender, target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-land card with converted mana cost 3 or less and a card with converted mana cost 4 or greater. That player discards those cards.
Mm-hmm.
Hoof.
Yeah, this card is just amazing.
Wow,
somebody cast it against me at the pre-release. And
did you feel bad?
I lost 2 cards. I was not happy about it.
And they had a 5/5?
Yeah, and it's not even like you exile the cards and get it back when you kill this, or you get a card back like with Thought-Knot's here. The cards are just gone.
They're just gone.
And
you could do this on turn 4?
Yeah, it greatly mitigates the risk of emerge too, because it's a lot of time you're like, oh, I don't want them to bounce it or to kill it, but then you just take the 2 best cards out of their hand, and it just doesn't get bounced for kill.
This card's just a joke.
Yeah, again, I wouldn't play it in a deck that wasn't black unless I was really desperate for a playable and I had a lot of mana in my deck.
Yeah,
but when
agreed.
you're black, you're going to play this on turn 4 every time that you can, and it's going to be very hard to beat.
Yeah, of note here as well is that all of these have a cast ability. So like the Decimator of Provinces doesn't get the pump for itself. Also, this one allows you to take away any removal spells that they were going to use on your Distended Mindbender while it's on the stack, and then it resolves, and now they can't be like, well, in response, I'm going to kill your Distended Mindbender. They don't have that option.
Yep. I like this card at an A- only because the power of the discard is relevant to how early you can cast it, because
Mm-hmm.
if you top deck it late game, it's just a 5/5. I mean, I think when you play it on turn 4, there's a really high correlation with winning the game, but
Yeah, yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
not as good of a top deck, so
Wow, Descended Mindbender. I'm just gonna go A, whatever.
yeah, totally reasonable.
Elder Deep Fiend is next. This one's blue and colorless. So it's 8 mana for a 5/6 with flash. It's an Eldrazi octopus. The emerge cost, similar to Descended Mindbender, it's 5 blue blue. So a lot of the same stuff we said, except for that blue instead of black. When you cast it, tap up to 4 target permanents. And remember, this has flash, so you can do this on your opponent's upkeep or before combat or whatever.
Yeah, a great card. I mean, the most common use for this card is going to be casting it at an end of turn and tapping 4 blockers and hopefully getting through for enough damage to win. And that's going to be more likely to happen when you add 5 power to the board with this card.
Right. That can now attack. Yeah, for sure.
It has other applications, but that's what I'm going to be hoping to do with it, and it does that pretty well.
Yeah, and I think the other one that we mentioned already is turn 4, and again, you can do this on turn 4. You play it on your opponent's upkeep and tap their lands, just take away their turn worth
of course,
mana.
If you're ahead on board, you should definitely be trying to do that.
Yeah, and you know what? You are, because you've got a 5/6.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this card just seems great. These cards are just busted.
Yeah, they're all really, really pushed.
I just want to give this an A.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I think like A minus A is.
Yeah, I mean, you can still
accurate.
generate card advantage just by not tapping down an attacker, and after they declare attacks, flash this in and eat it.
And then tapping their land so they can't cast a spell post combat.
Yes.
Or even just tapping their land so they can't float mana into blockers. You're just like, okay, if you have any trick, you have to cast it now, and then I just won't block.
God, exactly. Wow, that's a really good point.
Yep.
This card's super sweet. These are all really great. Again, though, same thing. 8 mana. Unlikely to play that unless I'm in blue.
Yeah, I think this one's more justifiable than the black one, because the black one is always costing 8 mana when the discard is a lot less powerful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't cost 10 like the. It's more justifiable to play in a deck that's not blue, but it's a much worse card. Like, it's a borderline playable card at 8.
Yeah, but like you said, Elder Deep Fiend can break up a board stall really well.
Yeah.
Okay. Next is Emrakul the Promised, and everybody's seen this one. 13 mana for a 13/13 with flying, trample, and protection from instants. She's, of course, a mythic rare legendary Eldrazi. She costs 1 less to cast for each card type among cards in your graveyard, and when you cast Emrakul, you gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn. After that turn, that player takes an extra turn. I do not know where to come down on Emrakul still. I actually I got really lucky and opened one up at the pre-release. I did not want to play it. I'm not like, if I was playing at a GP, I would not have had that card in my deck. I decided to put it in my deck for fun because, like, I made a big deal about opening it and I wanted to see what it could do, and it was, a thing that was on camera, so it was for fun and everything. But like, man, I don't know if I want to pay 9 for this.
Yeah, 9 is
it's
a
just
lot.
So much mana. I mean, yes, you do generally win the game when you cast it. I get that, but I don't put 9 drops in my deck very often.
I think at 8, it's like pretty good.
Probably gets there. 7 is a no-brainer, I think.
Yeah.
8 is almost,
it's too hard to get at 7.
Yeah, exactly. I'm saying, like, if we were to just straight cost it at 7, you would always play this. At 8,
yeah.
It's like, to me, it's like in between. You probably would play it, but once you get to 9,
yeah, 9 and 10 is like, and this is like under optimal conditions. It's like some of the time it's going to cost 11 or it's going to cost 12.
Yeah, that happened to me too. I never actually got to resolve it. The best thing I did was discard it to Crypt Breaker. Make a zombie.
That's a good use.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would give this card like a D or a D+.
I think so too,
maybe.
man. I'm not that high on it. I mean, look, the ability is insane. The creature itself is completely insane, but God, I'd really need some mana ramp or the ability to really know that I was going to be getting this thing to be 5 cheaper.
Yeah.
Consistently to be happy with it.
Yeah, or just have the ability to make a lot of mana.
Yes, which does happen as well.
Yeah, it can happen, but it's pretty tough.
But I'm giving Emrakul Promised End a D. Look, this is a classic type of card that people are going to come back at us and say, how could you do that? It's clearly an A. My opponent cast it against me and I lost the game. And this is the perfect card to illustrate the other side of that, right? Which is that you win a lot of games where your opponent's not casting that last card in their hand. And the reason why you won is because they couldn't. And that card's Emrakul and you never see it.
Yep.
It just sits in their hand and they go, good game, and they shuffle up their deck. And you're just like, well, I guess I won. But you never get to see that downside. You only get to see when they're like, land, Emrakul, you know, kill all your creatures with your own stuff and all this, you know, whatever. And then
you're
like,
like a just great sideboard card if both people have slow decks.
Totally. I like the card a lot too. Let's move on to Eternal Scourge, which is 3 mana for an Eldrazi Horror. It's a 3/3 at rare. We got a 3/3 for 3. You can cast it from exile, which is a weird sentence until you realize when Eternal Scourge becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, exile it.
Ooh, I wasn't even aware that I had that second ability.
Yeah.
That greatly reduces the power of the card.
Yes.
Because if they just have like a tapper, it's like you're spending mana on it, it just dies. Sure, you can cast it, but it's just going to die again.
Yes. So if they have repeatable ability to target it, then the card looks pretty mediocre. I mean, it is still just 3 to keep casting it, but it's a liability at that point.
Yeah. 3 mana for 3/3 is very good.
Yeah. I actually think the card's fine. I would play it.
I would play it too.
Yeah, like if they use a real removal spell on it, you can just cast it.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Right.
Because it just keeps coming back. So.
Right. So they're just going to avoid it. And I tell you what, a 3/3 for 3, like on turn 3 is good. Also, you can target it yourself. It's only your opponent's abilities or, abilities and spells. So you can still pump spell it or whatever.
I kind of like it at about a C+, but you just need to be aware that you should sideboard it out liberally.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a B-. I'm going to go a little higher on it because I just can imagine a scenario where they play it on turn 3 and you look down and you're like, well, crap.
Yeah.
It's just going to keep hitting me. I could throw a removal spell at it to slow it down a little bit.
Their best chance is just kill it in combat.
Then it just dies?
I think so.
Does it just die as normal?
Yeah. It says whenever it becomes a target of a spell, yeah. So if I just blocked it with the 3/3, they would just go to the graveyard.
And then that's not a bad scenario for me either. I'm back with you, C+.
Yeah.
All right. We've already done that one. Gyre Reach Sanitarium is interesting. It's a legendary land. It's rare. It taps for colorless mana, and you can pay 2 mana and tap it to have each player draw a card, then discard a card.
It gets very good if you have Madness cards. It gets okay if you're very interested in Delirium. And I think, in general, I would hope to play this. Like, if I was just black-green, I would just 17 land, 2-color, middle-of-the-road deck, just go 8/8 and play this card and think it's fine. Just because if you get to a point where your opponent has no cards in hand, there's no downside. It's just a land that's letting you loot, which is very strong. And in some games, like if your opponent just has a better deck than you, better draw, as long as you're not getting beat down and you can afford to pay 3 mana to be doing this, it's going to increase variance in the game, which you want to do if you're losing.
Yeah.
So some of the time, yeah, it is fine. It's nothing special, but it's a card that I would lean towards wanting to play.
I think so too, but it's like a C- or something, right? I mean, this is not the kind of card you're going to go out of your way to get.
Yeah, it's like a D+, because if you ever have double colored costs in both your colors, then you don't want it. Yeah. And a lot of the times you put it in your deck, it just never gets activated because either you're ahead or you don't have time. And there's a very select few number of games where you activate it, but the cost is low because it's a land, and the upside could potentially be pretty high.
Yeah, agreed. Well assessed. Handwear Battlements, we mentioned this one earlier. This is a land that goes with the Handwear Garrison. So it taps to add colorless mana to your mana pool, or you can pay red and tap it to have a creature gain haste until end of turn, which is, that's a real upside. And then you can pay 3 red and tap it, and then if you both own and control the rare Handwear Battlements and the rare Handwear Garrison, it becomes the Writhing Township that we talked about earlier, which is definitely a significant upside. Again, the scenario where that actually comes up is when you first pick Handwear Garrison and a Handwear Battlements gets opened at your table, because I don't think anybody else is taking it very highly at all.